This episode of Fermented Adventure the Podcast features Josh Morton of Barrow's Intense Ginger. In this episode, you'll learn all about this sensational, delicious ginger liqueur. Make sure you reach out to Josh and Barrow's Intense Ginger and let them know what you thought about the podcast. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guest. He's Josh Morton. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rich. Good to be here.
Josh, I'm excited. I'm thrilled. I am overflowing with energy because we finally get to talk Barrow's Intense Ginger today. So we're just going to say this is going to be an intense podcast.
You're right on brand there, my friend. I love it.
How did Barrow's get started?
So it got started as a hobby. I mean, I literally made it in my kitchen for my friends for a good 10 years before I turned it into a product that I started selling. So it was a happy accident. I had started out, I'd been to Italy and I had limoncello in Italy, and anyone who's had limoncello in Italy knows, you know, when you go in, it's made by the restaurant you're going into. It's super fresh. It's delicious. And then got back to the States and bought a bottle and was super disappointed and confused as to why it didn't taste like the homemade stuff that I had in Italy. I'm going to truncate the story because this can get really long if I go into all the details. But
no, tell the whole story, because this is the fascinating connection to what you do. And to your point, what you said about if you go to Italy or you go to somebody's smaller craft restaurant or distillery or whatever, it's small batch. It's made with love, and that's what you're doing. That's what you're creating.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing about limoncello is any commercial limoncello has preservatives in it because the citrus flavor is not going to last, and that's really the difference when you're tasting that versus the stuff that you get that's homemade. So I actually had a friend who had been a chef in Italy as an American. So that tells you his level of talent. And I was visiting him, and he had made some homemade limoncello, and it was amazing. And he was like, "Oh, it's not that hard to do. You could do it yourself." And it isn't that hard to do. It's hard to do well. And so he gave me some tips and tricks about how to do it the right way. And then he also had these experimental batches that he had in his freezer as well. And he was like, yeah, you can riff on it. You don't have to just do lemon. You can do other flavors. So what I started doing was I would make a limoncello, and then I would make an experimental batch. And the experimental batch, I did blood orange, I did grapefruit, I did rosemary, I did horseradish, I did all sorts of stuff. And when one day we had some extra ginger in the house that wasn't being used, and I used that. So I made a lemon ginger version, and my friends really liked it. So I would basically we would have dinner parties all the time. We'd have friends over, and we'd just serve it after dinner as a digestif over ice, like you do with limoncello. And I don't know if you've ever made limoncello. Have you, Rich?
No, haven't.
Okay.
We have not made anything except for I've got a carboy of mead downstairs, and at one point I'm going to have the bottle. But if you give me all the directions to do this, some of your other ideas, these other flavors, I mean, you already have this ginger liqueur dialed in. I'm not going to step on that, but some of these other ideas sound delicious.
Well, there's a reason I just did the ginger, because the other ones weren't as delicious. So, but maybe you could come up with something different that would be better, or different. So anyway, when you're making limoncello, at least the way I was taught, there's a bunch of different versions, but the way I was taught was you're zesting the lemons, and the key is to not get the pith, because the pith is bitter, and so you want to just get the essence of the lemon. And so I was hand zesting, dozens of lemons with a microplaner, and invariably you would zest your thumb and you would get lemon in your eye and your hand would cramp, and it was basically a very painful experience to do. And so anything to reduce the amount of lemons that I had to deal with was preferable. And so when I first did the batch with ginger, I used, maybe half as many lemons as I had done the time before, for a regular just lemon batch. And I was just grinding the ginger up in a food processor. So then the next time I did it, being lazy and not enjoying hand cramps and, zested thumbs and lemon in the eye, I did only a quarter of the lemons. And then the next time I did it, I did no lemon, and I just did 100% ginger. And my friends went like, this is the winner, and they loved it. And so it was easier to make and everyone liked it better. And so after a certain point, I stopped making limoncello altogether and just did this. And I would, make a batch every 3 to 6 months, something like that. And then we'd have dinner parties. I'd just serve it over ice. And it was like a nice, fun thing that I did for my friends. And this went on for a few years. And then we had a kid, stopped having as many dinner parties. And one of my friends started complaining about the fact that they couldn't get their ginger fix, and went out to the store one day and bought a bottle of ginger liqueur in the store. And they had the same experience that I had when I bought the limoncello, as in, hey, this is not the same thing. And so they, at the time, were working at the Food Network. And so they were like, you should turn this into a product. And I was like, you're crazy. Who goes into the liquor business? I don't know anything about it. And at the time, and this was 10, 12 years ago now, there weren't the craft spirits revolution hadn't really taken off yet. It was just starting to percolate. And so I, put them off for a little bit, and then they started recruiting other friends into the process to get me to do it. And I was
This is like an intervention.
Yeah, it kind of was.
It's like a ginger liqueur intervention.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So, and I was a small business computer consultant. So I worked for myself. I had worked with lots of small businesses. And so I knew what was sort of involved in ramping up a new business, and which I think was why I was a little hesitant about it. Because if I hadn't had that experience, I might have just jumped right in, because I wouldn't have known how hard it was going to be to do. But eventually, they convinced me, and so the laws had changed in New York to make it easier for small producers to start. You could get a craft license, and you could self-distribute, which really, and the cost of the craft license was a tenth of what it had been before. So, or even less. So instead of it being $40,000 for the license, it was $2,000 or approximately, kind of thing. And so it really made it something where I could, do this as a bootstrapped operation and see if there was any demand from the consumers, and experiment with it. And coming from a tech background where it was, you're used to iterating, right? In the digital world, nothing's ever finished, right? So you put up a website and then you can constantly change it. It's not like, oh, we're doing a physical product where you got to print the labels, you got to put it in the box, and then you can't change it after it's out in the real world, right? Whereas digital, you're constantly iterating. So I was used to that kind of mentality of iterating and starting small. And so I wanted to try and do a similar thing with this. And luckily the laws had changed to allow for me to be able to do something along those lines. And so the flavor, what you taste now in the bottle, is not what we did for our very first batch. And the interesting thing, actually, this is one that really makes me happy, is that the product that you get now in the store is better than what I made in my house. And that almost never happens. And so that notion of that handcrafted that we were talking about before, it's really hard to replicate at scale, is true. And there's two things that happen. Number one, luckily, ginger doesn't need any preservatives. It acts as a preservative, especially with the amount of alcohol that we have in our product. So that, let me back up and take you through the process. So we're taking
so for
ginger.
People that haven't had, I mean, you're an industry city in Brooklyn, and it's such a great tasting room, a great production facility. I would say one of the most informative tours you're ever going to get, from being able to really see the raw product and the systems it goes through and to get into the bottle. But for those that have never heard of this before, you're in 48 states, and they should all be running out now to find it in their state, wherever they are. But what is this wonderful ginger liqueur, this flavorful essence of what you do?
So it's literally four ingredients. It's fresh ginger, water, sugar, and neutral cane spirit. That's how we make it. We take approximately 200 pounds of fresh ginger. We trim it, wash it, run it through our buffalo chopper, and macerate it in 190 proof neutral cane spirit. So it's basically a cold press process. We don't peel it because there's a lot of great flavor in the skin, and then we macerate it for the whole process is a minimum of a month from start to finish. And so I basically scaled up the process I did at home. So I did it with fresh ginger at home, and I do it now with fresh ginger. At the time, I was using Everclear because that's all I could get as a consumer. My base alcohol is, as I said, it's a neutral cane, it's 190 proof. I get it from a pharmaceutical grade supplier, not a beverage supplier. So the quality of the alcohol is incredibly clean. Mouth feels amazing. So the base spirit is better than what I was doing at home. And then on top of it, at home, I was just grabbing the ginger that was in my local supermarket. And what we discovered is, and I didn't know this before I started, was ginger is not just ginger. There's actually multiple types of ginger. There's Hawaiian ginger from Hawaii. There's Hawaiian ginger from China. There's Brazilian ginger. There's Thai ginger. There's Thai baby ginger. There's organic Peruvian ginger. There's Jamaican ginger, etc. So there's lots of different gingers out there, and they all have their terroir. They all have different flavor profiles. And so when we first started making it, I just would go to the local, down the road, there's a produce market, a big produce market that also does a little wholesale. And I would get a case of ginger from them, and it was whatever they had in stock. And it turned out the first time I got it, it was the box said Hawaiian ginger. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then underneath it said product of China. And that's the most common ginger that you're going to find in your supermarket, which is a Hawaiian varietal that's grown in China. And those are the ginger root it's not actually a root. It's a rhizome. It's a whole nother story, but
that's a whole different podcast.
Google it. And if you want to geek out on ginger and why it's not technically a root, but the fingers are very fat and bulbous. The skin is rough. And that's sort of like your normal ginger that you're going to find. And then, so we start with that, and then we combine it with an organic Peruvian, and we blend the two flavors together to get the profile that we want. And so I wasn't doing that at home. So I have better alcohol in it, higher quality, and we're using multiple types of ginger and blending the two together. And then I'm also doing, we also rack it. We don't filter it. I was filtering it at home. So there's fresh ginger in them. There's more fresh ginger in the bottle than there was before. When you get a bottle, you'll see it's cloudy. That's because there's fine ginger particulates in suspension. So we really actually took the level of quality up a notch from what we were doing in my kitchen, what I was doing in my kitchen. And that's a really rare situation where you actually end up with a better end result on a homemade product than most cases. And as I said before, the nice thing is that because we have the fresh ginger particles in suspension, it keeps the flavor. We don't need the preservatives, and you get that really nice ginger fresh flavor, even though it's been shipped all across the country.
I love your enthusiasm, and it's infectious. When you go to your tasting room, Dawn and I have taken the tour a number of times. We were just there again with Bar Convent. And what I love about visiting you is your first stop with what we do with getting organized for the day with Bar Convent. So we get to start out with this ginger liqueur, and it's a way to cleanse the palate, but it's really a way to revitalize and get the systems going for what you're about to do for the day. What does something like Bar Convent mean for you and what you do and to your team?
So, I mean, Bar Convent in Brooklyn is, for those that don't know, it's a big industry trade show where they have all the big brands are there in the liquor space, your Diageo's, your Brown-Forman's, that kind of stuff, of the world. And then a ton of independents and a ton of smaller brands. And so you have beverage directors and you have distributors and you have bartenders and you have other people, journalists like yourself in the space coming through. And for years, the first, I think, 3 or 4 years it was in existence, it was over in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, the other side of Brooklyn from us, which for those of you not initiated in Brooklyn, it's basically like the other side of the world. Even though it's still in Brooklyn, it's a good 45 minutes, an hour away from our side of Brooklyn. Brooklyn's a very big place. I don't think people quite understand how big Brooklyn is. And if it was its own city, I think it would be in the top 5 if you just spun Brooklyn out on its own in the United States. So it's a big place.
It's a big city with lots of traffic and not a lot of, you can't get from here to there in just a couple seconds. No matter what time of day, it's going to take you a while.
Yeah. So we're over in Industry City, and 2 years ago, BCB moved over to Industry City, and Industry City is this amazing place. If you haven't been, you definitely have to come. It's 6.6 million square feet. It's, I think, a dozen independent buildings that are sort of all connected. We call it a campus. We're in building 5-6. Bar Convent is in building 5 and a little bit of 6, and mainly 7 and 8 is the main part of BCB. And so we're sort of right in the middle of it all. And so the nice thing about it is it enabled us to have people who are at BCB actually come and see our facility, which, just getting a booth at a trade show, which we did when it was over in the Greenpoint area, doesn't really tell the story. And so the nice thing about having it at BCB is it's in our backyard. And so we get to really show ourselves and give people the full tour as you've experienced. And I think that makes a huge difference. And the other thing about, for coming to Industry City any day, Bar Convent doesn't have to be happening. There's in building 3-4, there's Japan Village, which is the largest Japanese food hall in the city, as far as I know, and they have a Japanese grocery. And then they have a whole bunch of Japanese home goods that are on the second floor. And there's a chocolate making chocolatier that's there. You can watch them make their chocolates. There's a Sahadi's Market. There's a whole food hall. There's a whole bunch of furniture stores. So it's definitely, we get people out who come out for the day. I don't know if you know Chelsea Market. It's the same people who innovated there, and they came into Industry City about 10 years ago. And so it's like 6 times the size of Chelsea Market. And so it's really an interesting thing. And we're on what's called Distillery Row. So there's us and Fort Hamilton and Standard Wormwood and Gun Hill Brewing and Big Alice Brewery and Brooklyn Liqueur, which is a sake producer. And we're all making stuff at Industry City on a daily basis. So it's a really unique place to come to. And then at our tasting room, we call ourselves the New York Tasting Room. We're a tasting room of tasting rooms, is like what we like to say, because we're ginger liqueur. We mix with everybody. So instead of, your normal distillery where you go in and they have their bourbon and their rye and their vodka and their gin, and you taste 4 or 6 different things that they make, we make one thing. So you come and you taste our ginger liqueur, and you get a tour of how we make it if you want. And then we have another 200 bottles of New York State spirits behind our bar and representing over 40 different distilleries. So you can do a gin flight and try, if you're new to gin, you do our basic gin flight. If you're a gin aficionado, you would do our advanced gin flight. And you can try another 5 or 10 gins from a whole bunch of different distilleries around New York State and sort of experience what New York State has to offer when it comes to gin. Or you can do our bourbon flight or our whiskey 101 flight, where it sort of takes you through the different types of whiskeys. If you're a little new to whiskeys, you can do a single malt flight. And it's a really great experience because normally when you go to a distillery, you're tasting one distiller's product and, you may or may not like it. But in this case, like if you do the bourbon flight, you can taste 5 different bourbons from 5 different distilleries in New York State and then literally go home with a bottle of your favorite bourbon, because as a tasting room, we can not just serve by the glass, but we can also sell bottles of the stuff. And the one thing that's different about our tasting room as well is that everything we sell and there is made in New York State, and it's made with New York State agricultural products. So the one thing you won't find is you won't find any tequila and you won't find any rum, because there's no agave grown in New York State and there's no sugarcane grown in New York State. So that's the only limitation, is we don't have any rums or agave spirits because of those issues.
Pardon the interruption. If you like what you hear, if you love what you're hearing, please share the podcast. Please take a screenshot of the podcast, post it on your social media, tag us just to let everybody else know about Fermented Adventure, the podcast. We'd be grateful for your help to grow our podcast. As the mayor of Industry City, when does your term end? You're a wonderful ambassador for the community. I think that's the other thing that resonates with me. It's the true neighborhood nature of when you walk in to Barrows, you feel welcome right away. It's like, hey, thanks for stopping by. And, you take everybody through the process if they want to hear it, if they're interested, or you have these, other spirits available. And I think one of the benefits of having that spirit bartender community come in for BarCon in Brooklyn is you can really show off what this liqueur can do with a cocktail. And I have to tell you, the parties that we have, when people are asking for something a little bit different, let's say a cocktail, this is like one of my go-to secret weapons because it mixes so well with so many different things. It doesn't hide flavors, it amplifies flavors, but you stop and go, wow, what the heck did you just put in my cocktail? What did you put in my drink? Or as you said, let's have this neat, let's have this on ice and just enjoy it as it is. You have a very interesting business model to bring in those New York spirits and have your own product. Understanding that all this came out of, hey, a trip to Italy, how did you develop this business model that you have right now?
So there's sort of, I kind of view my business as 3 businesses. So there's the tasting room. There's my production business, which is actually making the product, and which is its whole other thing. A lot of people outsource that. A lot of people don't make their own product. They have someone else manufacture it for them, bottle it for them, and they're just out there selling it, right? So that's one business in and of itself. And then the third business is our national distribution and sales business in 48 states, where we're trying to get the word out about our ginger liqueur to everyone in the United States and hopefully in the future in the world. So it's really 3 different businesses that I'm running at the same time. And the reason, so a lot of times, with craft producers, they'll say, own your home market, go deep, not wide, and all that, which is great advice. And I wholly embrace it for most distilleries out there. But in my case, because I had a single product and it was a ginger liqueur, which is considered a modifier in the industry. It's not a base spirit. Most of the time, I'm not getting used as a 2-ounce pour. Most of the time, I'm getting used as a half-ounce pour. If I'm lucky, 3/4 or an ounce, right, in a cocktail. Sometimes it's only a 1/4 ounce. So the amount of volume I can do per account and per store is much lower. Most of the time when people buy a bottle, they're not buying a bottle every week. They're not buying a bottle every month. They're buying a bottle every couple of months, maybe twice a year. If I'm lucky, they're going through it fairly quickly, but most people aren't going through it as quickly as they go through their favorite bottle of bourbon, right? So my volumes per account are much lower than base spirits. And because of that, I needed to go wide instead of deep. I needed a lot more touch points. And so that was sort of what I did. And that's how I ended up in 48 states. As opposed to, and we were very strong in New York State. Obviously, it's our best market, but we're doing great in Texas. We're doing great around the country as well. So, I mean, I point out Texas just because Texas has been going gangbusters lately, and shout out to the Texas team. That being said, in terms of the tasting room, we didn't have our tasting room until about 5 years ago. We were originally just we were actually up on the 4th floor in Industry City, and so we didn't have any retail presence. And they came up with this idea for the distillery row, and they were like, hey, why don't you come down to the 1st floor and start selling on the 1st floor? And we had to sort of figure out what that looked like. And so my initial thought was, okay, what's the consumer experience? You walk into a normal tasting room and you have 5 or 6 things, and they take you through the whole process and the different things that they're making. And it's a whole, 10, 15 minute kind of experience. Whereas with my stuff, you come in, you have a taste of our ginger liqueur, and so
you do taste of raw ginger, so you can get the full experience, but you get that too.
Yes, but it's a much more truncated kind of thing, and yes, we can kind of extend it out and make it a little bit more involved. But I felt like there needed to be more, there to warrant people walking in the door, and because you can drink it on its own, but because it's ginger and it's sort of a pure ginger expression, it mixes with everything. If you look in flavor books, I don't know if you've ever seen, they have some like really interesting books on, I think it's called the Flavor Bible. I can't remember if that's the nickname of it or the real name of it. And you'll pick any flavor, so anise or lemon or whatever it is, and then it will tell you all the other flavors that it complements, and then the flavors that don't work well with it, and use cases and all that sort of stuff. And of all the flavors in that Bible, ginger is the most versatile flavor in the entire Bible. Literally, it works with almost everything. There's very few things it doesn't work with. And it's just super versatile. So when, I was about to launch the product, we were having a party, and one of my friends was there, and he happened to be an ex-bartender, and he was like, oh, well, have you ever made a cocktail with it? And I was like, no, because when I had I'd never made a cocktail. Well, because I'd make these small batches. I'd have 3 bottles in a batch, it was tiny. And so we were just serving it as a little digestif, and the idea of putting in a cocktail was like crazy to me. I also wasn't really a big cocktail nerd, so I didn't really know much about them. And so he started making cocktails with it, and literally, each cocktail he made was better than the next. And as you just said, it works with everything. And so it was like, oh my God, all of a sudden it was like, wow, this is going to be great for cocktailing. And it turns out it is. We actually built an app, which if you go to mixandmatchapp.com, you can download it from the Android or Apple store. And it's hundreds of recipes. You pick your base spirit. So if you're a rye guy or a bourbon guy or a tequila person or, a gin person, you pick your base spirit, and then it will give you a whole bunch of recipes using that base spirit. And if we don't have the spirit that you like, let's say you like, I don't know, is there such thing as a coconut gin? I don't know. But if there was, you could put a request in for a coconut gin recipe, and we would get back to you with it and update the app and expand it. Someone did it there's a coconut tequila that I didn't know existed, and someone asked for it. So we now have a coconut tequila recipe in our app. Anyway, so it just mixes with everything. And so then I started saying, okay, well, I can sell these other distillery products, but I've been doing this for a while and had become friends with a bunch of the other distillers. And now I'm on the board of the Distillers Guild and the New York Distillers Guild. And so if I brought in, Brian's gin, but I didn't bring in Derek's, then, or someone else's, they're going to get mad. And so I was like, well, how do I decide who's to bring in and who's not? And so it was like, well, if I'm going to bring one in, I might as well bring them all in. So I went from like having one gin to having 25 and, 30 bourbons and, 24 ryes or whatever we have. I mean, we have over 200 spirits. It's a ton of stuff. And so we then went the other direction and said, okay, let's be the largest selection of New York State spirits anywhere in the world by the glass or bottle. And that's how we leaned into it. And that's sort of where the idea for the tasting room came. And it's been great. People love it. But we also have people come in and they get themselves a frozen mule and they're super happy with that. And that's that, they don't, so you don't need to delve into, flights and all the rest of it. And you can just come in and have a really good cocktail too and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, as you pointed out, with Industry City and the way it's set up, you've got all these wonderful food restaurants.
I forgot. Well, Hometown Barbecue's right across the courtyard from us. How could I forget about them? They're the best. Oh my God. If you've never had Hometown, it's good.
Well, I'd like to say we've had it, but each time we've gone, they're out of stuff by the end of the night. So we need to get there earlier next time. You grab your cocktail and you can just literally, grab a seat, sit outside, get some food, enjoy. There's entertainment there. There's so much going on. And I love the fact that you got, with your tasting room, you have so many offerings for so many different people. You want a mule, you want a frozen drink, you want a cocktail, you want a flight, you just want to taste our spirits, you want to take home a bottle. I think a lot of this conversation, Josh, comes out of the idea of this is a craft spirits distillery and how it started from the beginning in your kitchen. From a trip to Italy, this is how it started. But now, if anybody, has the idea of, well, this is so fascinating as to how you've built your business. This is such a wonderful story to where you are today. The flavors here, I've been enjoying just sipping this while we've been talking, and I don't get a chance to do that with a lot of the products because, right now I'm looking at something that's basically 44 proof out of the bottle. Yep. It goes in there a lot higher. Your proof in the tank is how much?
So it starts at 190. After it's macerated, the water content from the ginger brings it down to about 150. And then, so you can actually, if you come to the tasting room, we call it Triple X, and you can actually taste it at the 150 proof, and it's 4 times the ginger concentrate. It's insane. You've had it, right?
I have, and yeah. I think it's wonderfully delicious. It's a very great compliment to the liqueur you have, and it really gives you an idea of how, all right, this is where it starts and this is where it comes to, and you're just a way you can enjoy this on either spectrum.
Yeah. I mean, the Triple X is definitely not for the faint of heart, and you couldn't be sitting there sipping it if you had it in your glass, for sure. But yeah, that was, so the key for me when I was making it and then turning it into a product was, how can I get the alcohol level as high as possible, the ginger level as high as possible, the sugar level as low as possible, where you're tasting just the ginger, you're not tasting the alcohol. And I got people, there's alcohol in this, which is, I always take as a high compliment. But the first sip that you take, you'll notice the sugar because your brain is very good at registering sugars. But after that first sip, the sugars you're not really tasting the sweetness anymore. It's all about that ginger flavor. And yeah, it's an interesting thing because sugar and alcohol have the same receptors in your brain. So that's why simple syrup is used in cocktails, because it's basically masking the alcohol. So when you're drinking a cocktail, when you're drinking Barrows, etc., your brain is seeing the alcohol and the sugar on the same receptors, but the sugar is basically masking that alcohol. And so that's why sugar is used in cocktails, to be honest. And that's why people like sweet cocktails.
What I find with this is, and you mentioned that first sip, what I really enjoy is the viscosity of this. And it's almost as if you put this ginger hard candy in your mouth and just allowed it to melt. And that, as you pointed out, the sugars, but it just coats your tongue. It just really coats the inside of your mouth. And when you swallow, I think that's when the ginger just explodes. You want Intense ginger.
Oh yeah. You want to do something funky?
Right now? Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. So what's your favorite whiskey? I mean, not brand style.
No, I mean rye, bourbon. I mean,
okay. Pick a bottle behind you that you wanna do this with.
Actually, I picked up a bottle of this is Red Pump. They're out of Washington, Pennsylvania, and it's a straight rye whiskey, 102 proof.
All right. So now take 2 shot glasses.
I got to get a shot glass. Hold on.
Two of them.
All right.
You got 2 shot glasses?
I got 2 glasses. Yeah.
All right. Pour half a pour of your whiskey in one.
Okay.
And half a pour. So you're making the whole shot, but you're doing it in 2 glasses.
Gotcha.
All right. So half in the whiskey.
So about half an ounce and half an ounce.
Exactly.
All right. So good thing is I have nothing left to do for the rest of the day. So
excellent.
All right. And then the same thing with the
ginger. Yeah.
We're like doing cocktails on the podcast today. This is great. Or
you're building a cocktail in your mouth.
Experimenting. All right. I just did that. Now what?
What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, I'm going to take one and then I'm going to take the other.
Yeah. Which are you taking first?
I think I want to take the ginger and then follow with the whiskey. Was that right?
So
I can't do them both at the same time, Josh, because I'll spill all down my chin. So
exactly. But so you know the pickleback, right?
Yeah.
Right. So normally with a pickleback, you do the whiskey and then you do the pickle as the chaser, right?
Right.
Most things you do the whiskey and then you chase it, right?
Right.
You were exactly right. You're flipping it.
Right. Because you mentioned all the things with the sugars and what that's going to do to my brain, right?
Right. And the fact that and you were talking about the viscosity and how it coats your palate.
Right.
So what happens is you take the ginger. Well, I'll let you do it, and then we'll talk about what happened.
All right, here we go.
Start with the ginger, and then finish with the whiskey.
Okay, I got sourness. I got more grain forward. I didn't get the ethanol as much of the whiskey, and I've had that whiskey a number of times, and it changed the flavor profile of that whiskey in the initial offering.
But what's going on in your mouth now?
Burn, oakiness. Tingling. I get the tannins from the wood now.
You still get the ginger?
Honestly, I don't.
Really?
I don't. Maybe I need to do this experimenting. We're just going to do this again and again until I get it right. I don't know. I mean, I didn't, I don't know. It just, for me, what really happened is when that rye hit my palate, it almost like picture being on a beach and getting hit and crashed by a wave. And the ginger almost the barrows set my palate up, and it almost became this cleansing, this amuse to what I was expecting with what I was going to get to the rye. I still get that tingling, and to your point, that tingling still could be the ginger. But I got a sense that was more the rye grain. I got a sense that more was the proof of the rye. But I'm going to this is going to be a party thing. I'm going to do this with everybody. We have a party coming up on Saturday. I'm going to see what people say about it.
Nice. Yeah. So I mean, I don't. Is that an overproof rye?
It's 102 proof.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Maybe the proof was too high.
So it's a little high. But that's so. But what happens is because the the Barrow Intense is very viscous, it coats your taste buds. So then it's sort of protecting them, if you will. And then you get a blend of the two. So you're basically making that cocktail in your mouth. And then the finish is going to be the rye, but there should be a lingering of the ginger as well going on there. And I don't know if you did a little, it looked like when you took it, you instead of shooting it, you kind of did a swallow where you kind of kept it in your mouth for a sec before you put it down with the rye. But it's a really weird thing. Normally you wouldn't think to do a shot where you're finishing with the whiskey, but because the ginger coats your taste buds, it actually works really well. You seem to enjoy it.
Oh, I loved it. I've learned so much on this podcast, and one of the things I've learned is maybe I'm not a good sample for the whole survey idea of how to do this. Was I supposed to swallow the ginger, or keep it in my mouth, or do it together? I'll need directions.
Swallow one, swallow the next.
All right,
but you enjoyed it, and that means.
Oh, I loved it. No, I loved it, and
exactly.
Here's the thing. We've had these conversations quite often, and I'm sure it depends for, let's say, even for what you have with this Barrows, it depends on what you ate before. It depends on what you had to drink. What's your palate like that day? And I've been sipping the ginger for a while too. So my palate kind of got acclimated to it. Yep. So for me, here's what I did. I loved it. I can't wait to share this with other people. And from a standpoint of what I found right out of the gate when I did take that whiskey and I did swallow it was, again, I almost got this sourness out of the whiskey. I almost got these other flavors that I really have never seen in that whiskey and experience. So that created a whole new experience.
Yeah, it enhanced the whiskey.
Wow, sure. We never know what to expect on the podcast. You take us.
The thing that I love is, what's the best way to drink it, and that question to me is just, one where there's not a right answer. And I think people get caught up in like, oh, how should I drink whiskey? When you go to a tasting, and it's like, there's no right answer. You might like it straight. You might like it with a couple drops of water. You might like it over the rocks. You may like it in a cocktail. They're all right answers. As long as you're enjoying yourself and enjoying the spirit and doing it responsibly, you have to put that in there. Then you're doing it the right way. There's no wrong way to do it. I think the only thing that I would say would be the wrong way is if you don't try it in different ways to figure out what works for you. Mm-hmm. So I know for me that, what I like, and it's different from other people, but I've tried all of the different ways of experiencing whiskeys, right? And so I think that's the only wrong thing would be to not try the different ways to figure out what fits you. And I also know when it comes to whiskeys, bourbon's not my jam. I'm a rye guy. I'm a single malt guy. The Irish whiskey's not so much. So, but I know that because I've tried them all and tasted them and experienced it. And so I think that's sort of the key with all this stuff is there is no right answer. Don't beat yourself up if, oh, well, this person on some silly, podcast said this is the way you have to do. No. Everyone's different. Everyone has a different way of approaching things. And, drink it over the rocks, drink it in a cocktail, drink it with whiskey, drink it with tequila, whatever it is. As long as that you enjoy it, then that's the right answer. And I think that, people get caught up too much in the perfect way. No. But do experiment and figure it out because it's radically different depending on how you serve it. And that's for all spirits. To
your point, Josh, you could add this to tea, hot tea.
Mm-hmm.
You could make this, and you could make a sauce out of this or a glaze for food.
If you go on our website, there's food recipes. Yep, it's really great to cook with. In the winter, I definitely will have lemon, honey, hot water, and this. It's great on the throat. Nice end of the evening, sleep well kind of thing, especially if you're not feeling great. I made milkshakes with it. Take vanilla ice cream, take Kahlua, which you would never think, right? Throw it in a blender. Boom, you got this amazing boozy milkshake. It's delicious. It's stupid yummy. I've done it over like over ice cream just as a drizzle, as a little extra thing there. It done a glaze over ham, carrots, all sorts of stuff. It's fun. It's really fun. It's super versatile. And it's because it's fresh ginger that you're dealing with. So anything that you would do with fresh ginger in cooking, you can use this, and it adds also a little sweetness to whatever you're cooking as well. So it's nice.
Barrows. How does the name Barrows come into all this to what you do?
So, reason I'm laughing, it's. Have you ever heard the what's your porn name, which was like the street you grew up on and your kids and your first pet, right? The street.
Mine would be Enter Turn Snoopy. I mean, that doesn't sound like a good porn name if you're asking me. I mean, I always thought it was like I don't know what that was, but I thought it was a different variation. But yours is very interesting too. I'm coming to one of your parties, Josh. I mean, these sound like wonderfully fascinating discussions that go on.
We try and have fun. So Barrow Street in New York City is where I live, and it's where it was invented. And intense is the flavor, and my wife likes to say my personality. So we just took the two and put it together, and that's how we came up with Barrow's Intense.
Okay.
It's going back to its original origins in my kitchen. That's where the Barrows comes from.
See, I love that, because if you look at it and you're like, you just live with it, but you don't find out. I would have been remiss not to learn where the name comes from. So thank you.
And for us, it also felt like it was an old name. And so it felt like, okay, this has been around for a long time. And so that's kind of why we went with it, was it had this feeling that this could have been something in the 1920s that existed, right? And that was one of the other reasons that we chose it. We hope we'll be around in another 100 years, right?
Well, we'll try. We'll try to continue to help you stay in business to the best that we can do. Looking at that, Josh, what's the future look like for Barrow's Intense and what you're doing?
So, I mean, if you're in the New York metro area, please come visit us at the tasting room. I think you'll really enjoy yourself, and obviously the rest of the industry cities. It's a great trip. And if you're around the rest of the country, we're in 48 states. We're not in West Virginia. We're not in Vermont. We're looking at West Virginia, but it's a small state. It's a control state, so it's a little harder to work with. You
mean to tell me you're in Pennsylvania, and one of the hardest states to me to get into, but you're not in West Virginia or Vermont? I mean, Vermont, you just throw a couple bottles over the state line and then you're there, right?
Well, actually, both all three states are what's called control states. I don't know if you've had this conversation on your podcast before.
Yes.
Most people being from Pennsylvania know what that means. And Pennsylvania is a hard state to work with because it's a control state. But as far as control states goes, it's not the worst of them. It's actually in the middle of difficulties. And so we're special order in Pennsylvania. But Vermont and West Virginia are control states as well, and they're a little bit difficult to work with, and they're also very small markets. So the bang for the buck of the effort just wasn't there yet. We just finished being on the cocktail menu at P.F. Chang's for Chinese New Year. We were on their menu with Rabbit Hole rye. It was a great cocktail called Down the Rabbit Hole. And so with that, we were in a lot of states because P.F. Chang's is in a lot of states. But we're just talking to another national account that has some spots in West Virginia. So we need to potentially get into West Virginia for that to service them. And that's really like one of the things we're hoping is to sort of grow those sorts of opportunities in the national accounts, so that people can get us in more places and it's more easy to find. And then we're also, we have a new sort of push that we're doing around the Mule Mosa. Go to mulemosa.com for the recipe. And it basically, you take the Moscow Mule and the mimosa, so your favorite French cocktail and one of the favorite cocktails out there, and you put them together. And you end up with the Mule Mosa. And so that's our sort of new fun thing that we've been playing around with and hoping to get that out into more places, which will drive consumer engagement, which will then help with getting into more liquor stores and just getting it in front of people. Because I think that it's a little intimidating at first when people get our stuff, because they're like, I don't know what to do with it. And, it's this intense ginger flavor and it's a little scary. And so providing people a really easy sort of introduction to it that they can get their brains around, I think is super important for us. And so we actually came up with these copper, I don't know if I showed them when you were visiting, these copper, I'll have to send you a pair, copper champagne flutes. And so it's basically your traditional mimosa with the shot of Barrows in it. So really,
as you were talking, the reason why the Moscow Mule, I mean, it's the copper, it's the vessel.
Yep.
And it's also the look of that mimosa coming out of the champagne flute. I love, look, here's the thing. First of all, make a point to go to Industry City, make a point to visit Barrow's Intense Ginger. You know, for what you will experience, you will become a raving fan, as Dawn and I have. And this will be like, how do I get a hold of this? How do I restock? How do I make sure I always have this on hand? But I'll tell you what, if you're not offering some sort of high-level business class for students to learn how to run and expand and grow a business, then you should be in the 2 or 3 minutes you have left where you're not sleeping in a day. But seriously, all these ideas and all these things that you presented to me, you know, from a successful business and a successful entrepreneur, Josh, that is so just wonderful. That's a gift. So thank you for providing that to me
my
and
pleasure.
The listeners. What you're doing.
Well, I'm always open to coaching people and helping people out if you're starting out, or you know, it doesn't have to be liquor related. I'm a big fan of small business and entrepreneurs, and you know, happy to help out with people. Actually have a good friend in Pennsylvania. Shout out to Base for Stands over there. He makes these amazing mic stands for musicians, and completely off topic, but you know, he was trying to figure out, you know, about how to grow his business, and so I'm sort of on his advisory board for that, and I love doing that. It's super fun, and yeah. So if you're a musician and you need to mic your drum set, or you got a grand piano you need to microphone, or you got a quartet, he's got these modular mic stands that are super cool, where you know, one mic stand takes the place of 4 mic stands or 5 mic stands, and it can do all sorts of things that you really hard to do with traditional mic stands. So it's really cool stuff. But yeah, I put that offer out to anybody on your podcast if you need someone to bounce ideas off or advice. I'm very open to it.
All right, heads up to Tom and Kim Bard of the Bard Distillery, because they're going to be opening up their music venue, and they need these Base 4 stands. So they should be ordering a bunch and making sure they're well outfitted for the. Are
they in Pennsylvania?
They're in Kentucky.
Oh, Kentucky. All right, cool.
I want to say this has been such a wonderful treat just to sit here. We haven't had this experience, Josh, where I could just sit here and drink your liqueur and just talk to you. But it's the experience that I'm having is this ginger, just the earthiness, the spiciness, the sweetness. Like you said, it's a low proof. You don't realize the alcohol is there, but it is a warming experience. You do recognize, hey, I'm getting a little buzzed, and now I understand why. We've talked about it on the podcast today on so many levels. You can mix this with cocktails. You can drink this neat. You can put this over ice cream. You can put it in food. It's so versatile. 48 states, go out there and grab it. Go to your representatives in Vermont and West Virginia and say, what's wrong? 48 have them. We don't. You need to stock this.
If your local liquor store doesn't carry it, we are with major distributors in every state. We're not with any super tiny boutique distributors. We're with Republic National, Johnson Brothers, Breakthrough, the big guys in almost all the states, in all the states. So if your local liquor store doesn't have it, it's super easy for them to get. They already have an account with our distributor. They're already ordering for it. So it's easy for them to add it to their next order with that distributor. It isn't this niche. It is a niche thing. It's a very small brand, but at the same time, we have a good footprint. We have great distributor partners. Shout out to all of them. Thank you for supporting us. And so that's the thing that is really helpful for us is when we get that pull from consumers. So if you go into your liquor store and they don't have it, you can say, hey, you know, please bring this in, and if they have another ginger liqueur, you know, you can tell them they got the wrong one. And that's just not me saying it. Actually, we've been honored. It's really nice. We got the highest rating from Wine Enthusiast for any ginger liqueur out there with a 93. Drink Hacker did a roundup of all the ginger liqueurs in the market, and we won that one. So we have been, you know, outside verified as the best ginger liqueur in the market. That's not me saying that. That's not Rich saying that. That's
no, I haven't said it, but I will say it. No, wait, I can be an expert too. No, I mean,
you are an expert. You are an expert.
But no, this is why I say this is like that little secret weapon. This is like something that you've been doing what you've been doing for a time, but there's still so many people that can be introduced to what you're doing. And this is why I say, hey, have you had this? Wow, mind blown. All right, how do I get some of this? Where do I get it? Where do I find it? So is there anything that we've talked about a lot today? Is there anything we haven't talked about on the podcast that you want people to know about you or Barrow's Intense Ginger Liqueur?
I mean, the one thing that I would say, for me is this should be a staple of every bar. You got to have all your base spirits. So you got your rum and your tequila and your gin and your vodka, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're going to have a triple sec and you're going to have a vermouth. And then this is the next thing in your bar that you're going to want to have to really step up your home cocktailing game. And so a few years back, I was in Georgia and Atlanta, and I was visiting a bartender, and he was talking about how bartenders had called Saint Germain the bartender's ketchup, right? Put it on everything. It's kind of sweet, etc. And he's like, but your stuff, it's the bartender's mustard because it works with everything and it's spicy. Got a little spice to it, so it brings everything up. So I definitely would say but I as I said, I love it. I love drinking it on the rocks, just neat. It's delicious to sip on. Or if you keep it in your freezer and chill it, and you drink it without the ice. And there's no wrong way to drink it for sure. But you are right about it. It just brightens up those any cocktail you're making. Just add a little extra of this in, and take any of your favorite cocktails that you've been making before. We actually have a little card that we made when we first started, where we took 40 classic cocktails, and what we said, we intensified them, where we either removed or just added our ginger liqueur to it, and it really does. It really adds a new dimension to whatever cocktail you're doing, and it's a lot of fun. So. And if you have any questions about where to get it, you can go to our website, barrowsintense.com, and there's a location finder. You can put in your zip code, and it'll show you the closest place to you. And once again, if there isn't a place close to you, we also have a list of our distributors by state, so you can go into your local liquor store and you can say, oh, they're with Republic National, they're with R&DC, and in my state, they're with Johnson Brothers, they're with Breakthrough, etc. Fedway. On and on and on. So Empire, New York. Easy to get, easy for the local liquor store to get if they don't carry it, and that would be super helpful for us. And
here's what I would just tell them, Josh. If you come visit us in the store, just get on the plane, get in your car, get in the train, go to Barrow's Intense Ginger, go to the source, because to me, that's where you just get the whole experience. And that's where even what's in this bottle becomes even more intense. It just becomes more of that wonderful experience to say, I remember the first time I was there. I remember the second time I was there. Again, the way you and your staff welcome people in and you get the full vibe of Industry City, it's just a wonderful experience. So if you're not doing anything for the next 12 months and you need travel plans, there you go. That's what you need to do.
And there's some other things to do in Brooklyn and New York City as well, besides us. If you come, I'm sure you'll be able to fill up your day.
If people want to find you on the socials, where do they go?
It's real simple. We're barrowsintense.com on our website. We're at Barrow's Intense on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I think we're still on Twitter. We don't do a lot on Twitter, but we do a lot on Instagram as sort of our main social. I think we're Barrow's Intense on TikTok as well, but don't do a lot on TikTok.
All right. Check out Josh dancing with some ginger on TikTok. Josh, thank you so much today. I know you've got a lot on your plate, really busy. And just this time today, I'm very grateful for your time. I'm grateful for you and your friends for being able to have this experience 12 years later. Because, hey, if you hadn't made that trip to Italy, if your friends hadn't been jonesing for a little bit more of your ginger liqueur, I think the world's so much a better place now because of what you do and what you provide. I really do. And when
that's super sweet. It may be all the ginger talking, but I really appreciate it. You guys have been super awesome. I love every time you come to visit, and it's been really enjoyable getting to talk to you for more than 30 seconds without 500 other people, yelling at me at the same time. So I really appreciate actually just getting a good one-on-one, and I'm looking forward to you guys coming out for your next visit. And yeah, I thanks a lot.
Thanks, Josh. Looking forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.